Sarah, a dedicated nurse with a heart full of love, had always put her family first. She and her husband, James, shared a deep bond that started most serendipitously over a shared love for animals at an adoption fair. Their connection quickly blossomed into a beautiful marriage filled with love and mutual support. Sarah's mother, Linda, played an integral role in their lives, often helping and expressing pride in their happy union. However, as time went on, Sarah began to notice changes in James. The man who once showered her with attention and warmth became increasingly distant. Long work hours turned into late nights, and conversations became short and distracted. Sarah's concern grew, but whenever she tried to talk to James, his responses were vague and unconvincing. Seeking advice from her mother only deepened her worries, as Linda's nervousness suggested there was more beneath the surface. As Sarah's suspicions mounted, the warmth and joy that once defined her marriage started to fade, leaving her with a heavy heart and unanswered questions. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Sarah was a fiercely determined and compassionate woman whose unwavering devotion to her family defined her very essence. Those who knew her spoke of her as a pillar of strength and love, a woman who put her family's needs above all else. Her career as a nurse in a bustling city hospital was no accident. It was the fulfillment of a lifelong passion for healing and caring for others. Though her days were often exhausting, she never allowed her demanding job to interfere with the time she cherished with her loved ones. Her husband James was equally driven and diligent, pouring his energy into his work as a civil engineer. James spent long hours on construction sites, ensuring every project was executed flawlessly. His colleagues and those around him admired him, not just for his impeccable work ethic, but also for the genuine kindness with which he treated everyone he encountered. The story of how Sarah and James met was nothing short of serendipitous, a twist of fate that would alter the course of their lives forever. On a bright and cheerful weekend, Sarah found herself drawn to an animal adoption fair, her heart set on providing a warm and loving home to a pet in need. Little did she know that this simple outing would lead her to the man who would become her life partner. As she strolled through the event, her eyes locked with James's across the crowd. He was cradling a small, innocent puppy, completely captivated by the tiny creature. Drawn by a shared love for animals, Sarah walked over to him, and they struck up a conversation that flowed as effortlessly as if they had known each other for years. By the end of that fateful chat, they had already set plans to meet again, their connection undeniable. What began as a chance encounter at the adoption fair soon blossomed into a love story that felt both inevitable and magical. As time passed, Sarah and James became inseparable, their bond deepening with every shared moment. When they finally exchanged vows in a heartfelt ceremony, it was a celebration of a love that had grown from the purest of beginnings. Surrounded by family and friends, they promised to stand by each other through all of life's twists and turns. Their marriage was a seamless blend of their careers and personal lives, with Sarah continuing her dedicated work in nursing and James steadfastly pursuing his engineering career. Together, they navigated the ups and downs of life, always finding comfort and strength in each other's support. But even the most harmonious relationships are not immune to the complexities of life. As the years passed, subtle changes began to creep into their perfect world. Sarah's mother, Linda, who was blessed with natural beauty and an aura of grace, had been widowed for 4 years. At just 40 years old, Linda was a radiant presence in Sarah and James's lives, always eager to lend a helping hand. Her close bond with her daughter and son-in-law was a source of solace, and she often expressed her belief that James was the ideal partner for Sarah. From the very start, Linda had embraced their union with warmth and encouragement, seeing in James the qualities that made him the perfect match for her beloved daughter. Yet, as life moved forward, the dynamics began to shift, and the once clear path ahead became clouded with the unspoken challenges that all relationships face. One crisp morning, as was her habit, Linda arrived at Sarah and James's home, her entrance through the familiar kitchen door signaling her warmth and care. With a cheerful smile, she greeted them. "Good morning, my dears. I picked up some fresh fruit from the market today. Thought you might like some." Sarah, always touched by her mother's thoughtful gestures, wrapped her arms around Linda and replied, "Mom, you're a godsend." We can always count on you to brighten our day, James, following suit with a warm hug, added, "Good morning, Linda. You bring such joy and positivity into our home." With a playful smile and a wink at James, Linda responded, "James, you know how much I love being here. Besides, someone has to keep an eye on you too. How's work treating you?" James sighed, a mix of pride and weariness in his voice. "It's hectic, but nothing I can't manage." "And you, Sarah, how was your shift?" Sarah, still carrying the weight of a long day, smiled faintly and said, "Tiring, but it feels good to help people." "Mom, would you stay for dinner tonight?" Linda's eyes sparkled as she replied, "Of course, if you'll have me." James, with sincere admiration, remarked, "I'm always amazed at how you juggle everything, Sarah. You handle so much stress at work and still manage to be so loving at home. I'm truly lucky to have both of you in my life." Sarah's gaze softened as she looked at James, her heart full. "Mom always said I found the perfect partner, and she was right." Linda, smiling proudly at James, added, "And I still think you're a wonderful husband for my daughter. I'm so proud of the happiness you've built together." The three of them continued chatting animatedly as Linda busied herself in the kitchen, falling naturally into her role of nurturing mother and supportive mother-in-law. But beneath the surface of this familiar domestic scene, Sarah was increasingly troubled. Over the past few months, subtle but unmistakable changes had crept into her once harmonious marriage. The James who had always been so tender and attentive now seemed like a shadow of his former self, growing more distant with each passing day. His absences from home became more frequent, and his explanations were always the same: work was more demanding than ever. One evening, Sarah found herself alone in the living room, anxiously glancing at the clock as she waited for James to return. He had promised to be home by 7 p.m., but as the minutes ticked by, her worry deepened. It was now past 10 p.m., and still no sign of him. Finally, the front door creaked open, and James walked in, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Sorry, I'm so late, love. Work has been crazy," he said, offering an apology that was beginning to feel all too familiar. Sarah tried to mask the concern in her voice as she replied, "I know work is tough, but you've been pulling so many late nights lately. Is everything okay?" James, avoiding her eyes, muttered, "It's just the pressure. We have tight deadlines, and I can't let the team down." "I understand," Sarah said softly, "but I miss the time we used to spend together." Forcing a smile, James promised, "I miss it too. I'll make it up to you soon, I promise." But as the weeks turned into months, James's assurances began to ring hollow. The late nights continued, and his once heartfelt apologies grew more mechanical, lacking the sincerity they once held. Sarah couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. James seemed more distracted than ever, often glued to his phone, barely acknowledging her presence as she prepared breakfast or tried to engage him in conversations about their plans. The connection they had once cherished now felt strained, their weekend outings and social gatherings with friends becoming distant memories. One evening, after another long day of silence, Sarah couldn't hold back any longer. She found James slouched on the couch, his attention elsewhere, and quietly sat beside him. "James, can we talk?" she asked, her voice tinged with both hope and fear. He turned to her, trying to mask his weariness. "Of course, love. What's on your mind?" "It's about us," Sarah began, her heart heavy. "I can't shake the feeling that you've been pulling away. Is everything okay? Is it just work, or is there something else?" James, caught off guard, quickly reassured her, "It's nothing. Just a lot on my plate at work." But Sarah wasn't convinced. "I know work is stressful, but I'm worried about us. We're drifting apart, and I don't want to lose what we have." James sighed, forcing a smile as he reached for her hand. "I promise I'll try to be better. I just need some time to sort things out." Sarah nodded, but the knot in her stomach remained. She wanted to believe him, to hold on to the love they had built, but the distance between them was growing too wide to ignore. And as she sat there, searching for reassurance in his eyes, she couldn't help but wonder if their once unbreakable bond was beginning to fray. That evening, as Sarah and Linda worked side by side in the kitchen, Sarah couldn't hold back her worries any longer. "Mom, can we talk? Something is weighing on my mind," she began, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Linda, sensing the seriousness in her daughter's tone, turned to face her. "Of course, dear. What's troubling you?" she asked, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. Sarah hesitated for a moment before continuing. "It's James. He's been so distant lately. I don't know what to do. He says it's just work, but I feel like there's something more going on." Linda froze for a brief second, her eyes flickering with unease before she quickly masked it. "Oh, Sarah," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of nervousness. "Men can be like that sometimes. It's probably just work stress getting to him. Try not to worry too much." But Sarah, noticing her mother's discomfort, pressed further. "But Mom, he's never been like this before. I'm concerned. I feel like I'm losing him." Linda, clearly wanting to steer the conversation away from this topic, suggested, "Maybe he just needs a bit more space. Sometimes that's all they need." "And you've been working so hard yourself. How was your shift today?" she asked, trying to shift the focus back to Sarah. "It was exhausting, but right now I'm more worried about James," Sarah insisted, her concern evident. Linda forced a smile, attempting to reassure her daughter. "I'm sure everything will be fine, sweetie. Men tend to withdraw when they're overwhelmed. Let's not dwell on it and finish dinner. James will be hungry after such a long day." Though Sarah sensed that her mother was uncomfortable with the conversation, she decided not to push further at that moment. She helped Linda finish preparing dinner, but her thoughts were elsewhere, tangled in a web of doubt and unease. She wanted to believe that it was just work-related stress, as her mother suggested, but the nagging feeling in her gut told her otherwise. She knew she needed to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing something she wasn't ready to accept. In the days following their conversation, Sarah couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something was amiss. She began to notice more troubling changes, particularly in her mother's behavior. Linda started appearing at their house more frequently, often without any prior notice. At first, Sarah tried to brush it off, thinking her mother was simply being her usual helpful self. But as time went on, she couldn't ignore how often Linda was there almost every day and how James seemed to be more present at home, arriving earlier and spending less time at work. One afternoon, Sarah came home earlier than usual and was immediately greeted by the sound of laughter coming from the living room. As she stepped inside, she was surprised to see her mother and James sitting together on the sofa, deep in conversation and laughing as if they were sharing some private joke. "Mom, you're here again? I didn't know you were coming today," Sarah said, trying to mask her surprise. Linda, smiling warmly, replied, "I thought I'd drop by to keep James company while you were out. I knew you'd appreciate coming home to everything ready." James, rising to greet her, added, "Hi, love. Your mom brought some new recipes she wanted to try out. I think you'll love them." Sarah smiled, but as she joined the conversation, she couldn't help but feel like an outsider in her own home. Linda and James continued their lively chatter, seemingly oblivious to her presence, deepening her growing discomfort. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Sarah made a plan to return home even earlier the next day. When she walked through the door, she found Linda and James in the kitchen, laughing and cooking together like old friends. "Mom, you're here again. You didn't tell me you were coming," Sarah remarked, her voice tinged with frustration. Linda, avoiding eye contact, responded awkwardly, "Oh, I thought you wouldn't mind. James and I were talking about a new recipe and decided to give it a try." James quickly jumped in, trying to diffuse the tension. "Relax, love. Your mom just wanted to help out. She even brought dessert." Sarah forced a smile, but inside she felt increasingly uneasy about the growing closeness between her husband and her mother. As the days went by, Linda's presence in their home became even more constant, almost as if she had moved in. Every time Sarah returned from work, Linda was already there, always engaged in conversation or laughter with James. One evening, as Sarah walked in, she found them again in the living room, chatting as if they were the only two people in the world. "Mom, you're here again?" Sarah asked, her voice betraying her confusion. "Yes," dear Linda replied with a smile. "I thought I could help out with a few things around the house." James, beaming, added, "And she's been a great help. We've been having a lot of fun." Sarah felt a cold knot of suspicion tighten in her chest. "This is strange," she thought to herself. "Why is she here every day without telling me?" The frequency of Linda's visits, coupled with James's sudden change in behavior, gnawed at her relentlessly. Unable to shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, Sarah resolved to come home even earlier the next day, determined to find out what was going on. After enduring yet another grueling day filled with gnawing discomfort and relentless doubt, Sarah reached a breaking point. The weight of uncertainty had grown too heavy, pressing down on her with an unbearable force. She could no longer live in the dark, plagued by suspicion and fear. It was time to unearth the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Determined, and with her resolve hardened, Sarah meticulously crafted a plan. The next day, while casually sitting in the living room with James and Linda, she masked her inner turmoil behind a composed exterior, carefully setting her scheme into motion. So tomorrow, I have to stay late at work. I might not be home until after 10 p.m., she mentioned, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. James, eyes wide with concern, immediately reacted, "That late, love? Are you sure?" With a forced smile, Sarah replied, "Yes, unfortunately, it's going to be a long day. But don't worry about me. I'll manage." Linda, ever the caring figure, placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder, her touch warm yet intensifying the icy fear within Sarah. "Dear, don't push yourself too hard. If you need anything, just call," Linda said with genuine concern. "Thank you, Mom. You two take care of each other. I'll do my best not to be too late," Sarah responded, carefully observing their reactions, her heart pounding as she tried to keep her nerves in check. Her hope hung by a thread, desperate to finally uncover the reality she feared. The night arrived sooner than Sarah had anticipated, each passing hour adding to the knot of dread tightening in her chest. The day at work had been a haze of strained smiles and tense moments, as conflicting thoughts waged war in her mind. As she left the office, she felt the full weight of what lay ahead pressing down on her. Stepping out into the cool night air, her heart thundered in her chest, echoing the chaos within her mind. She scanned her surroundings, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow before slipping into her car, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. "Stay calm, Sarah. You have to know the truth," no matter what she urged herself, though her confidence wavered with each heartbeat. As she drove through the city streets, their familiar glow seemed eerily dim, as if the darkness around her was a reflection of the darkness looming over her life. "Am I ready to confront what lies ahead?" she questioned herself, the drive feeling endless, the distance to her home stretching further with every doubt. When Sarah finally turned onto her street, the sight of her house sent a chill down her spine. She parked and sat motionless, battling the fear that clutched at her throat. "This is it," she whispered to herself, inhaling deeply as if the air could fortify her resolve. Her legs felt like lead as she forced herself out of the car, each step toward the front door filled with dread. With trembling fingers, she fumbled for the key, her breath shallow and ragged. The key slid into the lock, the quiet click of the door unlocking sounding louder than it should have. The door creaked open, revealing the darkness within, a darkness that seemed to mirror the uncertainty in her heart. "I have to be silent. I need to know what's going on," she thought, the tension in her chest nearly suffocating. She eased the door shut behind her and tiptoed through the hallway, each step carefully placed to avoid any sound, her pulse thundering in her ears. As Sarah neared the living room, the sound of hushed voices reached her, freezing her in place. Her heart pounded so fiercely it drowned out everything else. She strained to hear, her breathing shallow and quick. Linda's voice drifted from the kitchen, light and casual. "James, could you hand me that spice over there?" she asked. "Sure, here it is," James responded warmly. Sarah crept closer, her breath hitching with every step. She edged closer to the kitchen entrance, the world narrowing to that single doorway. When she finally reached it and peered inside, what she saw shattered her. The shock hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice barely audible, the words trembling on her lips as the truth, raw and devastating, unfolded before her eyes. Hidden in the dimly lit hallway, Sarah's heart raced wildly as she strained to hear every word exchanged between James and her mother. The walls seemed to close in around her as the truth she had dreaded for so long unfolded before her ears. Her breath hitched when James murmured, "Finally, we're alone. I've been longing to get rid of that insufferable Sarah." "I can't wait any longer to kiss you," Linda responded in a voice dripping with longing. "I've been dreaming of this moment too. I'm tired of concocting excuses just to see you. Today, I'm all yours." They moved closer, their lips meeting in a passionate, forbidden kiss, as lovers lost in their world, oblivious to the devastation they were causing. Sarah's heart shattered into a million pieces as she watched the scene unfold. A storm of emotions raged within her: anger, betrayal, despair, all battling for dominance. She felt paralyzed, unable to reveal herself despite the burning desire to scream and confront them both. The weight of the betrayal was unbearable, yet she knew she had to remain composed, at least for now. With trembling legs and a mind racing with turmoil, Sarah quietly retreated down the hallway, her world collapsing around her. James and Linda's words echoed in her head, each syllable piercing her like a knife, leaving her struggling to comprehend the enormity of what she had just witnessed. Once back in the seclusion of her bedroom, Sarah crumbled onto the bed, her body shaking with silent sobs. The betrayal was more than she could bear. The person she had once trusted with all her heart, her mother, had conspired with the man she loved. It was a double betrayal, a wound so deep she wasn't sure it would ever heal. "How could they do this to me?" she whispered to herself, tears streaming down her face, soaking the pillow beneath her. The pain was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She felt as though the very foundation of her life had been ripped away, leaving her adrift in a sea of confusion and despair. The betrayal twisted her insides like a vise, each breath painful as she tried to wrap her mind around what had happened. "Mom, how could you?" she cried out softly, her voice filled with anguish. The image of James and her mother locked in that intimate embrace replayed in her mind, tormenting her. The trust she had in them both was shattered, broken into pieces too small to ever be repaired. Sarah knew she had to confront this nightmare head-on, but the mere thought of it filled her with dread. How could she face them knowing what they had done? Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Sarah wiped away her tears and steeled herself for the confrontation ahead. Her heart felt like it was being squeezed into a vice, but her determination was unwavering. She couldn't ignore the betrayal. She needed answers, no matter how painful they might be. With slow, deliberate steps, she made her way downstairs, each step echoing in the quiet house, amplifying her dread. When she reached the living room, her worst fears were confirmed. There they were, still wrapped in each other's arms, about to kiss once more. The sight tore at her soul, but she forced herself to push through the pain. "James," Mom, Sarah called out, her voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and anger. The two sprang apart, as if they had been caught in a crime, their faces draining of color. James stammered, "Sarah, but the words died in his throat as he met her tear-filled gaze. Linda looked equally stricken, her face a mask of guilt and regret. But Sarah had no time for their excuses. "Don't bother, James," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "I've seen enough." Her eyes shifted to her mother, the person who had betrayed her in the cruelest way possible. "Mom, how could you? How could you do this to me?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her broken trust and shattered heart. Linda struggled to find the right words, her voice trembling as she began, "Sarah, sweetheart, we." But Sarah cut her off sharply, her tone laced with hurt and anger. "There's nothing you can say to justify this. You both shattered the trust I had in you, in a way I never imagined possible." A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of Sarah's uneven breathing as she fought to control the storm of emotions raging inside her. James attempted to salvage the situation, his voice pleading, "Sarah, we never wanted things to end up like this." But Sarah had heard enough. Her voice wavered as she snapped, "Enough. I can't bear to listen to any more of your lies." Overcome by a mix of raw pain and seething anger, Sarah stood her ground in the living room, her eyes cold and resolute. "James, Mom, get out of my house now," she commanded, her voice firm. James was taken aback, stunned by the finality in her tone. "Sarah, we can talk about this," he began, trying to find a way to salvage what was left. But Sarah cut him off once more, her voice like steel. "No, I don't want your excuses, explanations, or justifications. Just leave Linda." Tears streaming down her face, reached out to her daughter in desperation, her voice trembling with regret. "Please, Sarah, I'm begging you." But Sarah's cold gaze stopped her in her tracks. "You betrayed me, Mom. You both betrayed everything I believed in. Now leave, before I change my mind." James and Linda exchanged helpless glances, their hearts heavy with the weight of Sarah's words. James, defeated, lowered his head and muttered, "Sarah, I." But Sarah remained unmoved, her voice icy as she repeated, "Now, James." There was no more room for debate. Realizing that Sarah's mind was made up, they gathered their belongings, their steps heavy with the finality of the situation, and left the house. As the door closed behind them, Sarah stood in silence, a mixture of relief and deep, soul-crushing pain flooding through her. She had made her decision, but it had come at a devastating cost. With James and Linda gone, Sarah was left alone with the echoes of their betrayal. She knew she couldn't simply let them walk away without facing the consequences of their actions. "This won't go unpunished," she vowed to herself, her resolve hardening with each passing second. Determined to protect her rights and restore her dignity, she sought out a family law attorney to discuss her options. During the consultation, she poured out her story, laying bare the depth of the betrayal she had suffered. The attorney listened with compassion, offering clear, practical advice on how to move forward with both the divorce and a lawsuit for emotional damages. "Sarah, based on the evidence you've provided, you have strong grounds for pursuing compensation for the emotional distress you've endured. In addition to the divorce proceedings," the attorney explained, "we'll begin by compiling all the necessary documentation to support your case." Sarah nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. Taking these steps, while painful, was a way to reclaim her life and her sense of self. "I won't let this destroy me," she silently promised herself. The road ahead would be tough, but she was determined to emerge stronger. Months passed, and the divorce case finally reached the courtroom. The judge reviewed all the evidence meticulously, considering the extent of James's betrayal and the profound emotional impact it had on Sarah. After careful deliberation, the judge delivered a decisive ruling. "Given the circumstances and the evidence presented, I hereby award all assets and properties accumulated during the marriage to Mrs. Sarah Silva. Mr. James Silva will retain no rights to these resources," the judge declared with authority. James accepted the ruling with a heavy heart, fully aware that his actions had led to this moment. For Sarah, the judge's decision was a bittersweet victory, a necessary step toward closure, yet one that could never fully erase the pain. As she left the courtroom, Sarah felt a complex swirl of emotions. The divorce marked the end of a chapter filled with love, betrayal, and heartache, but it also signaled the start of a new journey, a path of healing, recovery, and rediscovery. She knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but she was ready to move forward, leaving behind the shadows of her past with James. As she stepped into the sunlight outside the courthouse, Sarah took a deep breath, embracing the possibility of a future free from the pain that had once consumed her. After uncovering the painful betrayal by both James and her mother, Linda, Sarah made the difficult decision to seek justice not only for the dissolution of her marriage, but also for the profound emotional trauma she had endured. Determined to hold them accountable, Sarah reached out to a civil rights lawyer to explore her options for seeking compensation for the emotional damage caused by this devastating breach of trust. The lawyer listened attentively as Sarah recounted the harrowing experience, recognizing the gravity of the situation. With her lawyer's guidance, Sarah filed a legal action against Linda, aiming to address the deep emotional wounds inflicted by the betrayal. The legal process moved swiftly, and after careful negotiations, the parties agreed to an out-of-court settlement. The lawyer contacted Sarah with the news she had been waiting for. "Mrs. Sarah, I'm pleased to inform you that we've reached a favorable settlement. Linda has agreed to pay $40,000 in compensation for the emotional damages you suffered," the lawyer explained. Though the settlement could never fully heal the pain of the betrayal, Sarah felt a sense of relief. The legal closure brought her some comfort, allowing her to begin the process of moving forward. "Thank you," "This resolution will help me start anew," she responded, her voice heavy with both gratitude and sorrow. On the other side, Linda was overwhelmed with regret. The reality of her actions had sunk in, and she was heartbroken over the pain she had caused her daughter. As the legal matters were settled, both Sarah and Linda grappled with the shattered remnants of their relationship. The betrayal had left a wound too deep to heal easily, and despite the financial agreement, the bond between mother and daughter seemed irreparably damaged. One evening, after the settlement, Sarah faced her mother with a heavy heart. "Mom, I can't pretend everything is fine. What you and James did destroyed something in me that I can't just rebuild. I need space-time to heal on my own," Sarah said firmly, her voice tinged with sadness. Linda, with tears streaming down her face, reached out to her daughter, her voice trembling with desperation. "Sarah, please, forgive me. I never meant to hurt you like this," but Sarah, her heart still raw, could only shake her head. "I can't, Mom. Not now. Maybe not ever." The decision to distance herself from her mother and James weighed heavily on Sarah, but she knew it was necessary for her peace of mind. The house where she had once built a life, filled with love and memories, was now a place tainted by betrayal and sorrow. Leaving behind the home that had become a source of pain, Sarah relocated to a distant town, far removed from the memories that haunted her. In this new place, surrounded by fresh faces and unfamiliar experiences, Sarah slowly began the journey of healing. She found solace in the simple things, new friendships, quiet moments of reflection, and the gradual rediscovery of her strength. As the days turned into months, Sarah learned to forgive herself for trusting too deeply and began to rebuild her life step by step. The distance from her mother and the finality of her separation from James provided her with the space she needed to heal. Although the path ahead was uncertain, Sarah embraced it with a quiet determination. "Maybe one day I'll find it in my heart to forgive. But for now I need to focus on myself," she whispered to herself, resolute in her decision. With that, Sarah closed the chapter on her past and stepped into the future, hopeful that with time she would find the peace and happiness she deserved. She knew that healing was a long and difficult journey, but she was ready to face it, one day at a time, determined to create a life free from the shadows of betrayal. As Sarah's story comes to a close, we're left with a powerful reminder about the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of self-care, even in the face of deep betrayal. What have you learned from Sarah's journey? Whether it's about the strength to move forward, the courage to seek justice, or the wisdom to prioritize your well-being, there's something for everyone to take away. We'd love to hear from you. Comment below with one thing you've learned from Sarah's experience that you'll bring into your own life. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories and life lessons. Thank you for watching.